Welcome back to AutoTechNick. We're back on the restoration of my 1979 Centurion jet boat. Today we're focusing on finishing up all of the rigging. Primarily we're focusing on the control system, so we're talking steering cable, rack and pinion, reverse cable, throttle cable, place diverter controls, and in typical fashion, well, I went ninja style because the cables are already in and you probably can't even spot them right now. I'll show you how I did it right here in a second. So you guys might be wondering why I stuffed the seats back in the boat and I'm doing mock-up on the seats if we're going to be working on the control cables. Well, specifically the rear seat is going to come into play with the control cables on how I route them and more importantly, try to hide them. The front seats are in because I need to find the best position for the throttle pedal that suits me distance-wise, because previously it was way too far forward and it wasn't very comfortable. So I'm going to bring that back, and I really want to be sure that I can have the seats in here, get seated in here and really dial in that position so it's really just perfect for me. Also, I need to make sure that I have the seat in so where the steering wheel is going to be, because we have some helm work to do. That all turns out to be exactly how I want it. But before we get into all of this up here in the front of the boat, we actually need to go all the way back to the back, and there's some things I want to show you on our place diverter. All right, so last time that this boat was functioning in the water, we were not running a place diverter. I was running an old school Berkeley Diverter with the electronic control box on it. Nothing wrong with that setup, and I had really no plans of or intentions of replacing it during this rebuild, except for it was a series of decisions that drove me down this path. Early on in the build, once I discovered that the transom was bad and I knew the pump intake was coming out, obviously it's a no-brainer to get it machined for a shoe and ride plate, which we did. But I heavily debated on doing a pump setback, actually to one point that I had myself fully convinced that I was going to set the pump back onto the boat. We can clearly see that I did not do a pump setback, and there's a variety of reasons why I chose not to do that, mainly for reliability. It's a family lake boat. I was willing to sacrifice a little bit of the performance of the boat and top speed to have a more reliable, longer lasting boat. But back to this place diverter. Now, I had my mind made up that I was going to do a pump setback. I even went as far as ordering the aluminum to make new transom covers. Well, at that time is when I ordered this place diverter, and you can see that I have some different arms and a reverse bucket on it. This is what place diverter considers a low profile unit, specifically made to keep the reverse cable down low on boats that have swim steps. Also, if you notice, this is the same type of unit that you'll find on a Berkeley 12JE or JF pump, where all the cables come out of the lower corner of the transom. Now, I intentionally bought this unit because I figured with a pump setback, the pump's going to be set back 5 inches or so. I'm going to be adding a droop onto the back of it plus the length of the place diverter. That was going to give me a lot of room to run the cables out. On the other side of the transom back here was my initial plan. Loop it under the bowl and ride plate and then up over here. And a setup similar how the 12F and 12E pumps are. But I was doing this purely off aesthetics. I was going to be able to keep from having one big cable looped over, running my reverse bucket, nice down low. Yes, it was going to be under the water line, but I had plans on how I was going to have that sealed up and not have any issues with it. So with that decision, I was like, yeah, that's going to be a great idea. It's going to be super trick. So I ordered this place diverter. So we can fast forward to where we're at now with no pump setback, and I have this low profile place diverter, and it kind of backed me into a bit of a corner. Now, since this is a low profile place diverter unit, the cable routing that they have planned for them or what they made them for is a bit different. So rather than having the cable come out of here of the transom, loop up and then down to the bracket, they actually have them coming out over here and kind of curling and coming back in so it stays below, essentially if you have a full length swim step on the boat. Now, in order to do so, I would have to, say I could drill a hole over here and I could route that cable in that manner, which I didn't like because then you have this boss and an abandoned hole over there. It's ugly. Drilling a hole into the transom, not an option. We're not doing that. I did toy with the idea of basically going back to what I initially planned when I had the pump setback, which is having the cable come out of this back corner over here, loop underneath the bowl and ride plate and over. The problem that happened there, since everything's pushed so far back to the boat without the pump setback, I was able to run the cable and get it there, but it kept putting pressure onto the nozzle here, where the steering wheel would want to always be to the left, and that wasn't a good option for me either. So I had to bite the bullet, I had to admit defeat, and I had to order new parts so I can swap the bucket and the cable mounting arm to a normal place diverter setup, which does sting a little bit because the last thing I needed was an additional expense at this point in the build. These are brand new parts, never been used. But all the ideas that I had with the cable, I just figured the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I'll just run it conventionally and deal with it. Safety and reliability is a bit more important at that point than aesthetics, and had to give up on the idea. So before we really get into the cables and what we're going to be doing with the routing, I need to get these parts switched over so that way everything is correct at the back end of the boat. All right, so my tail's tucked between my legs. My grand plan back here didn't work. I have all the new hardware on to make my place diverter essentially a standard place diverter with standard cable routing. Now, I will say that the cable routing up in the boat that I plan to do will be different. The cable routing back here is going to be pretty typical. There are a few things I want to discuss back here with the cable routing, specifically going through the transom. Now, since I was running a Berkeley Diverter previously, those require a specific steering tube because they actually push that steering tube in and out of your transom cover, and that's what actuates your Diverter. Since that's no longer, I'm switching just a standard short steering tube with the standard rubber seal and the 2 nuts. Nothing fancy to talk about here. I will be using a cap nut on here that has some O-rings that'll go ahead and seal up my cable so I can hopefully prolong the life of it, make it last as long as possible. Since I am running this place diverter droop, I went ahead and ordered their steering extension kit as well. So this extension kit is going to give me the exact length I need for this particular droop, so I don't have to worry about anything unusual or weird with my steering cable. So for the steering, pretty typical setup, nothing special there. However, where the reverse cable comes through the transom cover, I am suffering a very common problem on these older boats, and that is the thread engagement back here pretty much shot. These threads are pretty well stripped and there's not much left. Now, traditionally with the standard setup, you have your cable coming through. There's a spiral washer or spring, so to speak, that you slide onto the cable with the rubber seal, another spiral spring, and then you use this nut where those springs bottom out in the bottom of the transom cover, and this nut to drive those in and to compress them, and that's what seals everything up. And with time, use, and abuse, the threads inside here get pretty chewed up, and you can no longer tighten everything down and get that clamp in there. Now you can see I was able to get that nut here threaded in a couple threads and it's nice and tight. But the problem I had before I pulled this boat apart is there's not enough threads left at the top of the transom cover for me to get that all engaged and compress the seal. I actually had to go and cut that seal in half to reduce the height of it to get everything engaged, and I still had a thread on this. So we need to do something about that. We need to find a better way to get this sealed up that's more serviceable and longer lasting. Now, I'd say probably one of the most common workarounds for this problem is getting a cable gland and adapting this into the transom to fit in there to then seal up the cable. Now, I got this particular cable gland from CP Performance, and they recommend that you epoxy it into the transom cover like so, and then this allows you to pull the top half of it off, and then you can service your cable and get it in and out. Not a bad solution, works for most people. I wasn't too keen on epoxying that in there. Plus, the nitpicky side of me thought this fitting was pretty ugly, especially when I had previously ordered these other cable glands off Amazon, which are stainless steel. The one from CP is aluminum, and I think these look much nicer with the, the nice rounded head, and they just have a much smaller, more refined profile. However, these have the same problem where these threads don't fit in to the transom cover. There's no hope or dream. Now, kind of jump all the way back when I was trying to be creative and find different ways to route these cables. I ended up ordering a 1/2-inch NPT aluminum bung because I planned on welding this down into the transom over here, and I was going to use these cable glands to seal the cables up. That got me thinking, I'm not going to use this for the lower part of the transom. I could take this bung, grind out this hole, and weld it in right there, and then I would have, full, good, strong, healthy thread engagement to get these cable gland fittings in, either which one I chose to use. Not a bad idea, but as I was kind of looking at it and just thinking, sitting on it for a little bit, I came up with a new plan, which I guess you could say is plan A, and plan B would be to weld this bung in right here and have those threads back. Plan A is going to entail me taking the 1/2-inch stainless steel cable gland that I got off Amazon. I'm going to cut the whole bottom section of threads off and just leave this top nut on there. I have to stop at that point because that's where the register on the inside of it is at for the rubber and the sleeve to stop in order to allow them to seal when you compress this top fitting on. I'll cut all of that off. I'm going to take the factory Berkeley fitting here. I'm going to cut the top nut off where I just have the bottom threads. I'm going to weld the bottom threads onto my stainless steel fitting, and that's going to allow me to have the stainless steel fitting sit just like so, screw in with the factory threads, and it's going to look a lot cleaner and a lot nicer than the one that I had from CP. Now, I'm okay doing this. This is going to take a couple minutes. It's not going to be that big of a job. And the reason why I like it is because it's reversible. I have just enough threads on here that I think this is going to work just fine and seal up and be tight. And if it doesn't work, I'm out nothing. I can unscrew it and I'm back where I started, and then I can go back and weld this in if I need to. So that's my plan of attack. One thing I will note is the Amazon cable glands are too small on the inside diameter to have the cable slide through them. So I will have to drill them out in order to allow the cable to go through. But I think it's going to work out pretty great. I'm going to get started on this right now, get this all cut down, drilled out, welded up, and we'll see how it comes out in the end. Boom, one custom fitting. Got everything drilled out, so I was able to slide the cable through it and get this to fit. Cut the existing Amazon fitting right at the bottom of this hex section, and then I cut the Berkeley fitting right in that gap in between the hex and the threads, which was not my initial plan. I initially planned on keeping this hex on here and using that area to weld on, but in an attempt to make it as short as possible, I ended up cutting that threads there, which then gave me some not so desirable peering welds where it started to roll into the threads, but it still threads in all the way and bottoms out, and you can't see them when it's in, so I'll live with it. But you can see versus the other unmodified Amazon fitting, it's quite a bit shorter, and if we compare to the fitting that I got from CP, it's a big difference. And the perk of this fitting that I took a couple minutes to build is it just spins right in, tightens up, and there we go. So a few minutes, you know, it didn't come out that great on the weld, so to speak, but I always could get another fitting for the transom. I have this other stainless fitting, so I can take another swing at it and perfect it. But it's gonna work for now. So we have that taken care of. The rest of the cabling out here on the back for the reverse bucket's going to be just basic standard, nothing fancy. And you can see I have our steering extension on and assembled and our steering tube in. Again, the steering tube, nothing fancy back here. Everything will be traditional and normal. So now it's time to start talking about this cable routing. Now, I think we all know that I'm pretty particular, and I obviously have a penchant for doing things the hard way. Nothing's going to change here in this cable routing. Now, traditionally, you see most of the cables coming down the gunnels back here, then they curl out about so, and then curl into the pump, and I've never really liked that. I'm probably a little bit sensitive to the cable routing because the way this boat was configured last time, with that extra jetivator, it has an extra cable, so it had 3 cables back here. It had one for the jetivator, one for the steering, one for the reverse bucket, and they were ran forward, looped around, had them underneath the drive shaft. It just was a big mess of cables, and I really did not like it. Now that I've also gone through and spent so much time getting this plumbing all tucked away nice and tidy on the back of the transom and everything very neat, obviously we want to show off all of our gel coat work. I wanted to see if there was a way to get these cables ran where I could preserve this cleanliness, keep it looking really nice. So I've been studying the boat, looking at it, and I kind of got to thinking, what if I was able to run the cables right where they come out of the transom? They're going to drop down right about at the front of the pump, shoot them underneath the engine. Now, this was an afterthought and a happy accident, but all the drainage holes that I put into the boat here, right at the front of the engine area, they're big enough to run those cables through. So what if I was to run the cable through those? Now I have them under the floor, up under the seat. We need to get them up into the gunnels so we can get them up to the helm. What if I drill a hole in the floor underneath this rear seat and the cable can pop up through that? Then I can route it under the seat all the way to the side of the boat. And I can take advantage of the side trim that I have right there. And if you look back here, I do have a little bit of a gap to fudge with, and I can get the cables ran up into the side of the gunnel, all the way up to the helm. All you're gonna see from the cables is them coming straight out of here, straight down to the front of the pump, and that is it. Now, we don't have to worry about the third cable because I'm running a hydraulic place diverter, so we've eliminated that problem. So it's just gonna be the two cables, which another added perk, one on either side, keeps everything looking symmetrical. So the real tricky part about this, pretty easy and basic. I know I can run them all the way up to here without any problems into the holes. I know I can run them from here all the way forward without any problems. So everything right here under this back seat, that's what's going to be the tricky part. I have taken some tape and I've taped the stringers where the seat ends. You cannot see it because the cushion's there. So I know that the seat ends back here because of all the wood and gel coat work. We know the end point of the seat. So now that we have those established, this can come back out and we can eyeball what we have up here on the floor and how we're going to make all this work. So with the rear seat out and the cable mocked up and in here, you can see a rough idea of what my grand plan is on routing this cable. Now, one thing I will note is the amount of bends and the degree of bends is essentially the exact same thing I would traditionally have at the rear of the boat. It's just up here underneath the seat and a little bit lower in the boat. So I don't have to worry about putting too much of a bend in the cable, making my steering tough, or any of those issues. It's essentially the same thing, just in a wildly different location. Now, my specific plans with this cable are to bring it through the existing hole that I have in the bilge back here by the engine. Again, that hole is large enough to run the cable through, so I have no issues with that whatsoever. And that's going to place the cable up here underneath that section of the floor. So the real trick is going to be bringing the cable up through the floor, and then you can see that I have the end points to my seat right here. Once it's up through the floor and on this top side, it's going to be no problem to bring it over here across the stringer. And then over here on the side of the boat, I can bring it up like so, run it behind the support back up to the gunnel, and the side trim panel is going to cover it, and we're smooth sealing from there. So really this whole thing hinges on getting it up through the floor, which that's not really that big of a deal because I can just hog out a gigantic hole and make it fit. But I want to keep the hole as small and tidy as possible just for cleanliness and preventing stuff from getting trapped down in there. And that's really going to be the tough part of making sure I position the hole in the right place so that way I'm not putting the cable out of kink, and making sure it's going to allow the cable to run smoothly, although still get the cable in and out. So before we get too far into the location and size of the hole, I need to jump you guys over to the cable because there's a couple things to talk about and it has a big effect on the size of the hole. So I am replacing all of the cables in the boats with new ones. This is the old one that I have laid out, but it can really highlight what we have to think about and work around. If you notice back here on the rack end that goes up on the helm, this thing is gigantic. That would require a massive hole and opening to get that fed through due to its sheer size, width, and length, and how rigid it is. So with that not being a great option, we'll come to the other end, which is back at the back of the boat. And although much smaller in diameter, you have, say, probably 14 inches of solid shaft that is not flexible at all. So that's going to be pretty hard because the hole that I have to feed this through at the back is at the bottom of the hole, and then it's going to have to curl up to the floor. And I don't have enough distance to make that a nice gradual bend to get that through. And also, this nut will not fit through that hole that I already have in the bilge. So this end is not an option. What option does that leave us with? Well, come back up here to the rack end, and on this one I've already removed the bolts back here for the end stop, and that allows me to slide the casing off, and we have our rack that is attached to the cable with a small 7/16 nut. Pop that nut off, slide that gear off. Now I'm left with this right here, which is absolutely much more manageable. This shaft right here is maybe 7/16 in a diameter. I have maybe 12 inches, 10 inches of rigid parts here that I have to fight through that hole, which is manageable. And up here, the diameter of this fitting is maybe 3/4 of an inch. So I have to dissect this cable to get it ran through, which is a little bit more difficult, but this is going to allow me, or even give me a glimmer of hope of getting this in and keeping the hole manageable. Now, the only caveat is this existing Morse cable that I have, it all bolted together. And on my new replacement cable, which I believe is a Teraflex, As you can see on the front, it's all riveted to the case. So before we start drilling a hole and sizing up what we have to deal with, I need to drill these rivets out of this one and get this one all disassembled to be sure that it's the same as my Morse cable over there. I don't want to go into it assuming that they're the same. And honestly, if this is going to work, I'm going to have to dissect this one anyways to get it in. So now's the time to get this taken apart. Easy enough. I was able to drill out the two rivets, slid everything out, and it was essentially the exact same thing as the other cable. And going back together, I'll just steal the bolts for the other one since it bolted together to replace these rivets, and we are set. And if we look down here on the cable end, basically the same situation we had on the other cable, so it's good to know that this is what we have since this will be the actual cable we have to run through. So now that we have this established, what we need to run through the hole, we need to jump back and start scoping out the size and location of the hole. All right, I've been looking and analyzing this for a bit, and here's my plan of attack moving forward. Giving it some thought, looking at this cable, I think that I can't really account for the cable being able to be lifted up until this metal clasp is past this board back here, because that hole's pretty tight and I think I'm gonna get bound up. So that means that this cable, I have 10.5 inches of the steel. That's probably the most forward part of where that hole needs to be, where I can start bending it up and getting it through. Now I didn't want to leave the hole just up here because that cable is going to curl out and make the turn, and the seat's getting close. So I'm probably going to go back, drill a hole a little bit further back, and I'm going to connect the two holes with straight lines. So I'm just going to have a long slit, and that's going to make it a lot easier to get the cable through, and it's going to allow me to position it where I want fore and aft once it's all the way through for the best fit, and keeping the radius is small, but it concealed underneath the seat. So you can see I already have my lines and marks there, just a normal spade bit. Do keep in mind I have to avoid the center board that's underneath this floor, so I'm just going to kind of give it a little bit of an offset and hope that I clear it and go for it, I guess. Go right through the floor. There we go. And we're just going to do the second hole back here. Try to get that mark centered up. And now we'll just draw a quick line and get these two guys connected. And we'll use our trusty air saw to connect the dots. There we go. Let's get this hole cleaned up and see if the cable fits through. And boom. Success. All right, so now that we've successfully got that cable through up here, it's time to go back. I'll connect everything at the back of the boat on the steering arm. That's gonna set the appropriate length of the cable for me. I'm probably gonna jump over and start routing the reverse bucket cable because I plan on routing it up through here the same way. I have a couple different options on holes. I might jump it over on the hole on top of the floor onto the side, or I might bring it up under the floor like I did this cable. Not entirely sure. I'm gonna get working on those, get both cables up to this point, and we'll bring you guys back and start talking about the routing the rest of the way up to the front of the boat. Both cables are in and hooked up at the back of the pump. You can barely see them up there. We'll cover that later. And I have them coming up through the floor, and really the last obstacle at this point is getting it underneath the top of the stringer. The rear seat sits directly on top of those stringers there, so we can't have it sitting on those cables, and the bottom of the seat is just a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, then the cushion. I'm not really interested in taking these cables up into the seat, so gonna have to game plan on what I'm gonna do to overcome that obstacle. Now you can see for the reverse bucket cable over here, I just brought it in through this existing hole, and these cables are still small enough in the holes, they're still gonna function as drains. However, it was a nice happy accident to allow all this to happen. Now before we solve this problem on the stringers, I kind of want to get the cables connected up onto the controls, because that will dictate the length of the cables, meaning if I have a little too much cable length or not enough, I can kind of use this curve and curl the cables back to chew up some more of the cable length. So we're going to leave that as is. Let's go up to the helm and talk about it, because it's going to cause me some more problems. So I'm very fortunate that our boat is equipped with this very nice custom-made cover that covers the entire length of the boat. And I really enjoy this cover. It makes it really nice when you're transporting the boat down the freeway. You don't have to worry about seat cushions or life jackets flying out. You can snap it off real quick and stick the boat in the water and have a great day. But when this cover was made, the boat was still equipped with the original 3-spoke foam handled steering wheel that all these jet boats had in the 70s. And obviously that dictated the location of this pouch here for the steering wheel. So that kind of binds me up in a bit of a corner to where I need to position the steering wheel exactly back to where it was, because I have no interest in going through and reworking this cover. On top of it, the steering wheel was in a pretty decent location. So I do have a little bit of fudge room with this on the location, but it needs to be in the approximate area. And I've already done some mock-up, and I know what distance I need that steering wheel from the face of the helm, make it fit into that pocket. So with that distance known, I'll jump back to the bench and I'll show you what we're actually facing for our issue up here. So that original steering wheel, long gone. Threw that in the trash a long time ago. And I have been sitting on a new steering wheel that I've had for this boat even before we started doing this restoration and all the stringer work that I've just been waiting to put in. Now's finally the time. That new steering wheel has a different dish depth. I've gone through and done the mock-up and calculated what I need, and it was what I need from the face of the dash or the helm is about 6 3/8 of an inch distance to the back side of the steering wheel. Now, if we jump over and take a peek at our original bezel for the Morse cable setup, and this is the adapter that came with the new steering wheel, and get that set up, you'll see that we're at 4.5 inches, so that's not going to work. It's a far cry from what we need. Now we have the new bezel cover for the TerraFlex setup, and that makes our problem even worse, where we are sitting at 4 inches, and that's not going to work either. On top of it, both of these options are quite ugly. So with some creative shopping and looking around, I was able to come up with this combination with a standard polished helm bezel and a 3 7/8 steering shaft adapter, which all of this combined puts me roughly at 6 3/8 of an inch. And that is going to be exactly where I want this set up for the steering wheel. It's going to work great, and I've already mocked it up to confirm it. However, I have 2 issues with this setup that we need to overcome. The first issue is when I slide the shaft adapter onto our new rack, sits on there good. It's a taper shaft, so that way it bottoms out, and you can see that it is too low by about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. So that's clearly not going to work. We have a big issue we need to overcome there. Now the second issue was my fault, and I ordered this bezel cover for a Morse style setup. I did not order one for a Terraflex setup. So if we slide this over the existing mount, you can see that the feet stick out on all of the sides, and I'll flip this over and show you with the cover that it came with. Quite a bit difference in diameter. Now this is my own fault, and I could just return the part and get a new one. I will say though, I actually want to keep this one and run it because it fits on the dash better. This bottom edge at the bottom of it in its stock location sits flush with the dash now. So if I were to put this larger one on, it would actually hang down, and I'd also have to trim some of the trim that is on the bottom of the dash, and I just don't like that. So I've devised a way where I can make this fit and attach on as it did from the factory, and I can accomplish that at the same time that I'm modifying this bracket, so that way I can have the shaft height, therefore steering wheel height, at the height that I need. So here's everything out and on the bench. And one thing to keep in mind, I have 3 objectives that I'm trying to achieve here. First and foremost, I want the proper shaft depth, so that way my steering wheel adapter sits where it needs to and my steering wheel's properly positioned on the boat. Secondary is I want to retain the mounting points of the original Morse style mounts for this whole setup, so that way I don't have to drill more holes in the dash, but also by doing so is going to allow me to incorporate this factory base, which will, for the third thing to keep in mind, allow me to use this Morse style cover, which is smaller in diameter. Now in order to achieve all of this, I'm just going to be modifying this mount, which is responsible for the depth that this pinion sits into the dash. Right now everything's too shallow, too far sucked back, so these feet are too short. I'm going to cut them right off, get rid of them. I'm going to clean up this base of it and get it welded onto this 2.5 inch stainless. I can still get to all the bolts to get it bolted on. Once we have that welded on, everything cleared out, I can use this piece of wood, get everything mocked up, and determine what height I actually need this at in order to achieve the proper steering shaft depth. But first, time to do some cutting and welding. Alright guys, well, truth is, I've been down and out and sick for the past couple days, and I just could not stand to sit around in the house any longer. I am definitely a busybody. I have to get up, get out, be moving around and doing things. So I've been out here in the shop for a little bit today, been kind of tootling around with the steering, trying to make some progress on it. I can tell you it's been a struggle. I'm definitely not at 100%, so I'm pretty congested. Really not doing that great, but I'm out here trying to make things happen, keep making progress on this. So I'm gonna do my best to show you where we're at with the steering. Now, I went with my plan, the cutting the ears off of that original bracket and welded it onto the 2.5 inch stainless. However, I will say that this was actually the first piece that I welded it onto, and when I welded it on, I actually ended up having this piece not centered to the steering shaft, which ultimately would have had my steering adapter offset to this hub. So rather than keep fighting with it, I ended up cutting it completely off, and I got smart and realized that if I left that tubing just a little long, that it pretty much almost sits on the outside of this coupler. Therefore, I could use this coupler to help center this on the other end and center it on the bottom, which I did. So now we're dead set, and that is centered up, and we're really good to go and fully welded around. Now I left the height of this long because that's basically the next big hurdle, is determining where we need that height. Now to retain the ability to use this base cover that I want to use, I essentially need to reuse this base that was on the old Morse cable setup. And really, that just required me to knock it off of the old setup. It's just a press fit with these notches in here. And take my die grinder and open the opening up just a little bit so it will slide over. Let's see, it's a tight fit. Slide over my new piece. So that was a pretty easy solution and didn't take much work. And I need to do so now because I need to account for this thickness. Now this piece is aluminum. We have stainless steel here. Obviously we know those aren't compatible. And in order to mount this new bracket or cup, whichever you'd like to call it, into the dash, I just some 1 inch wide by 1/8 inch bar stock, and I'm just going to weld on basically feet like so around in the original positions for the holes I have in the dash, like that. And once they're welded on, I'll drill the holes around the edges and make them look pretty. And that's going to sandwich this aluminum piece in between the dash. And then with what we have going on now, I can raise this up or down and set whatever height I need, and that's going to solve all three problems. I'll use the existing bolt holes, I can use the Morse style cover, and it's going to correct the shaft depth that I need to do. Now I will say that I sat here off camera and I did a bunch of thinking and figuring, trying to figure out the best way to establish the shaft depth and get that taken care of. And I would say in my slightly impaired state today, it has taken a bit, but I think I have a path forward. And I ended up just putting my adapter on my steering shaft and measuring the distance that I have in between the face of this pinion here and the bottom of this coupler. Once I had that measurement, I'm able to just do some basic math, and I can determine what distance I actually need with this bezel. I need to give it a little bit of room so that way the steering shaft, you know, is not going to be rubbing on this, and then make those measurements, transfer it onto this piece. You can see that I've scribed that line across the bottom, and then I rifled through the drawer, found a socket that is about the appropriate height, and that is going to allow me to get that up on there and have it stand off. And I have it just a little short of that line, which is going to have everything a little bit proud, and that's going to help give me that little bit of gap that I have right there. Now if I am just a little bit off of my measurements, I can always shim behind these feet to the dash or in between the rack and the back side of this to make an adjustment in or out respectively. So I do have a little bit of fudge room with where I get these welded up, but I'm going to try to be as precise as I can. Before I cut the top of this off, I'm going to go get these 3 feet tacked on and in the position, and then I can use this piece of wood that I drilled a hole in, get everything mocked up to be sure that I have a, you know, the right depth and everything's going to work as planned. And then we can finalize this bracket, fully weld everything, clean up these brackets. So enough talking. I need to go get the welder back out and start fabbing this up. I'm back, feeling good. It's been about a week since I've been out here. Definitely feeling much better, almost at full speed, 100%, feeling pretty good. And well, I need to check my work since we were out here last, because I was definitely not feeling good. Truth be told, I barely remember being out here doing some things. I did watch the footage that I recorded, so I have a little bit of an idea where I was at, what I was doing, and where I was headed. And well, looking at my work for my bracket that I made, did pretty dang good welding it, so that's actually quite surprising, because of the little I do remember when I was out here. I remember I had the shakes really bad, and it was really challenging to get that welded, but got some decent welds, and it's all built. So I guess is what I need to do is show you guys what I built, how it's all going to fit together, and then what we need to do to actually get this all installed into the boat. Alright, so here is the bracket, and you can see those nice little COVID welds that we have on there, and I mean, no complaints from me. Truth be told, I really wish that I had more projects and more time behind the TIG welder to get much better at it. It seems like I have some projects where I'll be behind it welding for a little bit, then that thing will sit for a year before I pick it back up again. So, you know, a long ways to go, but no complaints there. Got that built, the bottom's done. I had to dress the welds on the outside on the bottom cup, in order to allow it to fit through our base piece here. They just stuck out a little bit and were too proud and have everything fitting so tight that that was necessary. And I don't think I've really shown you guys yet. This is tight. This base piece that was with the original setup, it has two little nubs on either side, and ultimately that's what secures our Helm bezel. There's two little holes there, and that just snaps on. So I have this piece of wood that I kind of use to get everything mocked up and set up, and the way this all will be assembled in the boat is we're going to just pretend that this is the face of the dash, and this piece just sits right there. You can see I've already drilled the holes, and we just set that piece right there. And our new bracket is directional. We'll just slide right on top of it and down, and we will throw our bolts in to be able to bolt this up and into the dash. And there you go. Now we have a new mounting bracket that mounts through the existing holes, and we have the provisions for our attachment points for our Helm bezel. And if we did this all correctly, we'll be able to take our pinion and slide it in when it's all installed, and you can see where those holes all line up. Get that bolted in, and if we did everything correctly, that's going to be at the correct height and give us all the dimensions that we need. However, there is one more thing that I need to do before I can actually get this all assembled into the boat and see if I was correct on my measuring, because, well, I don't even remember how I did it in the thought process. We mentioned this piece, 2.5 inches in outside diameter. The original hole in the dash is 2 inches, so we need to enlarge in that hole. I do have a 2.5 inch hole saw, although I do not have a 2-inch hole saw, or actually I think that hole is 2 1/4. Either way, I don't have a hole saw to fit in that existing hole to put on the inside of this whole 2.5 inch hole saw to make that cut. So I do have another option that I'm going to try to do, which would be bolting this piece to the dash and using that as a guide to run the hole saw in, because it fits, as you can see, very tight. Actually, with the teeth where they curl out, I actually can't get it over, and we have to come back from the back side. So take this, bolt it into the dash, and see if I can drill out that hole. If this doesn't work, I think I'll grab a carbide burr and just enlarge in the hole to what I need. That's going to enable us to get everything bolted in and confirm if we got the heights and dimensions set correctly or not. Without further ado, it's time to get this hole enlarged, get everything bolted up, and let's see what we wound up with. Installing our rack and pinion up on the Helm went mostly as planned. Taking the original mounting plate and using that as a guide for the hole saw, that worked perfectly, gave me zero troubles, and I was able to get that hole opened up to get our new bracket put in. And I was having some troubles initially getting this cover on, and I found that the feet for the mounting bracket that I made were too wide, and they were hitting on the sides of this bezel cover, which has a bit of a taper, and that was preventing it from sitting all the way on. So I took everything back apart, trimmed up those feet, shortened them up, reinstalled everything, and the next thing that I had is my gap in between the shaft adapter and the bezel was just a hair more than I wanted. So everything came back apart again, and I added some washers in between the pinion and the bracket that I built, which pushed everything down into the dash a little bit further. And now you can see that it has a incredibly small gap around there, and it does not rub. Now that we have everything in, also it'd be a great point to show you why I wanted to use this smaller bezel cover. If you look down right here, you can see, move it. If you look down right here, you can see where this sits flush with the dash, and I didn't want to get into cutting this trim. So that was one of the many reasons why I chose and wanted to retain the smaller cover. So if I were to switch the other cover, it would be hanging down here, which just for me seemed a little tacky and I didn't like it. But now that we have all of that in, you can see that I have finally the new MPI wheel on. I think I bought that like in 2018, and it has never made it on the boat, so it's nice to finally see it on there. You can see that I have the switches mounted up on top with a little bracket behind it for the place diverter controls. This was my preferred location up here. That way I can be peering over my right shoulder, watching the rooster tail, and where it's at with adjustment switches, controlling everything with my left hand. And here's the part where I kind of ran out of luck or skill. So to get the cover on and mocked up, you can see that it fits like I intended with the steering wheel. But if you notice here, my snaps kind of naturally want to sit back a little bit further. Same thing on this side. I can stretch this on and snap it on, which is no big deal. And it was pretty tight. And you can see right there, it's pulling on the front of the cover right here. It's very tight and very loose back there. Although I was very careful, I mocked this up before I ordered parts, took a lot of measurements. I missed the mark. That steering wheel is too far rearward. It's pulling on the cover, and I can tell you with me sitting in the seat holding the steering wheel, it's too close to me. It's a little too far backwards. So I tried to be as thorough as I could, tried to be as precise as I could, and I missed the mark on this one, which is okay, because if we just leave this cover off, and I've already eyeballed it and measured this, and if you look at the snaps right here, it's naturally sitting about 1 inch off. And from looking where the steering wheel was in this pocket, I determined by that measurement that it was also 1 inch off. So I think that pushing the steering wheel in 1 inch closer to the dash is going to get it right in the sweet spot. It'll be a bit more comfortable in the seat, and it's going to get it right back in that pocket. One would think that you could just cut 1 inch off this adapter and put it all back on, but it's a tapered fit with the shaft and the spline on the inside. So you'd have to remachine all that. That's not really an option. This was, I think, just under 4 inches with the total height. And one thing I did not mention is when I did all my calculations, I was accounting for this bracket for the place diverter switch. So essentially with where we're at now, I looked at it, took some measurements. I want to pull 1 inch out of it. It actually does put me in the ballpark, or with pulling 1 inch out of this gives me another, which I actually think is a better option on the shaft adapter here, because frankly with the way this sits up to the bezel, I'm not in love with it. I really wish that this was the same diameter and then would get a little bit taper in, get smaller and taper out, kind of like this on both ends, but that just wasn't an option. Again, I was really going after a steering wheel location to start with, so for using off-the-shelf parts, this was pretty much my only option to have it where I thought it needed to be. Now that we need to move it 1 inch in, I have different options, and I think it's going to come out a lot better. So I'm going to have to get some parts on order to get that resolved. So for now, we're just going to leave it and call it good. I did bolt the rack back up to this, so we have our steering. It's all hooked up, and I can turn it. Everything's moving at the back of the boat. And I was able to hop in the boat and actually push down on our steering cable back here behind the seat, turn the steering wheel, and confirm that there's no difference on tension or effort on the steering wheel. So we know that the cables under the seat is going to work. Our steering cable is set. We're good. And now that it's connected up here at the helm and at the back of the boat, we know how much cable length we have back here. So it's time to start figuring out how we're going to get these cables ran over the stringer and keep everything underneath the back seat. All right, so I have two ideas on how we can get these cables across the stringer and be able to get the seat reinstalled back into the boat. Now, my initial or my first idea entailed with just taking maybe a die grinder and taking a small half moon notch out of the top of the stringer. Yep, it would have to go through the fiberglass. We'd get down to the wood. Not necessarily pretty, but I don't think we'd lose much strength where it's anything to really worry about. And we could just make a little pocket right in there where the two cables sit right below the top height of the stringer. Once we're done with everything, come back, apply resin in there to get it all sealed back up, and we'd be set. And I know that'll work. No problem. It's just a matter of, do I want to grind into the stringers? I was back here messing with it, always thinking of, is there a better way, a different way I can achieve the same thing? And as I mentioned earlier, the back seat has 3/4 inch plywood on the bottom base for it, and the cushion snaps into that. And I was kind of thinking, what if I made a notch similar to what I did where it came through the floor, just about right here in that base of that seat, where these cables sit on top of the stringer, and kind of in that gap of in between the notch that I make, still below the bottom of the 3/4 of the seat where the cushion snaps in. I'm like, well, that would work, and I much rather make my cuts in my seat than my stringer. So I've eyeballed everything out. I got a piece of wood here, although this is a 1/2 inch, just a scrap piece of wood, and it's going to let me know if this is going to work. So I kind of eyeballed where these cables will have to drop down below the height of the wood and have a small bend on it over the stringer. Made those marks. This is probably 1 inch wide, so I'll take, say, 1 inch or 1 1/4 hole saw, drill 2 holes on either end. We're going to line across, and once we have that done with this line across on the board and the little slit, we'll be able to hold this up over the stringer with the 2 cables and see if this idea is going to work. If it works, it's just a matter of transferring those marks over to the seat and getting everything installed. All right, test board is cut, just rude and crude, and we'll see if this is going to work. And I think it is. And that size of that hole is pretty good. Maybe just make it a little bit longer so there's just a small arch to those lines. It's actually pretty minimal, and we'll be able to get that done. So I guess I need to do some marking, figuring of the location of this and get it transferred into the back seat. And we need to get the back seat in here to really make sure, you know, to seal the deal on this, make sure it's all going to work just how we want. To get to it. Well, I just ended up diving in and going for it. So you can see I made a mark where my stringer ran through. Really wanted to try to avoid this because those are the receptacles that the cushion used to snap in with. So I tried to keep it as forward as possible, which minimized the bend on the cables. And I actually ended up making this slot 1 inch longer than the test one that I made. And we'll flip this, get this flipped up back here. And you can see down on the bottom, I even went and routed those edges so they're nice and smooth. So when the cable sits in there, it's not going to cut into it, chafe it, or really just didn't want that sharp edge onto it. So I think this is all going to work pretty nicely. It's just a matter of, will it actually work like I think? So no time other than now to get the seat in there and see if the mark that I made is going to allow those cables to get up and over the stringer and everything to work out like I planned. All right, moment of truth. We'll see how well this all comes together. Get that up there. So the cables are still pushing the seat up a little bit, but that's because there's no weight in there. And right there, and boom, seat is in. Cables, you can see them right there, just fed through. They don't have too much tension on them on the bottom. My side panel is going to cover it where they sneak up right there. I might have to do some trimming on that side panel, but you really won't see any of that because it's tucked down in between the seat. But just like so, boom, we got the cables hidden. So I don't have any mounts set up for the seats yet, so I can't bolt it all the way in. I only can set it in position. That's going to be a project for another day, completely another video. But I do want to make sure that this whole cable system doesn't work exactly as I thought, so I don't want to leave any loose ends. Therefore, I'm going to get these side panels installed. Passenger side, it's going to be breeze. It's going to go back in how it always used to be. I'm anticipating on this side, might need to make some cuts, trim towards the bottom. So rather do that now than during the final assembly of the boat. I'm going to get working on these, and I'll bring you guys back and let you know what I ended up doing to get that side panel to fit in there. Just on the back side, they're made out of 1/4 inch plywood, so whatever I need to do should be pretty easy. I can peel this fabric off, make some cuts, wrap it back around, staple it. So a little trial and error, and let's finish up the last part of this. Well, that was an unexpected surprise. Side panel just dropped right on in on both of them. Seat sitting down and flush. So we're dialed, we're set. And you can see right where the cables go across, and they're well below the height of the seat. They're not even touching over there, right up there. And bring you guys down. You can just see them right there underneath the seat. So we are set. As I mentioned earlier, this reverse bucket cable comes out through the other drain hole on top of the floor right here. And the last cable that we haven't talked about is our throttle, which comes out the same hole on the other side, so it's symmetrical. And I already have that ran and mounted up onto the engine. So last thing we need to do with the cables here is to locate and mount the throttle pedal. So I'm going to get in the seat, start mocking that up, determine where I want it, and get the holes drilled and the mounts in. I'll bring you guys right back and show you what I ended up coming up for a solution on that. It's nothing too fancy, so I'll get that executed and just give you a recap once I come back. And then that's going to let us move on to the next section of this build. We have the gas pedal located and mounted. Before I talk about how I chose to mount it up to the side of the stringer, I wanted to take a quick second and talk about the location. Now, previously, the gas pedal is mounted on a 90-degree L bracket, pretty much dead center on the floor. And if you see right here at this view, I'm sitting in the back seat. With it being right dead center, it made it nearly impossible to get up into the bow. And I've mentioned we store a lot of skis up there. We do a lot of water sports with this boat, and it was a pain in the ass to get in between these two seats. These are so close that you can't even get your hips in there. You have to be on your side, and then you had to work around the pedal. So it was one of those things I kept in mind as I was putting this boat back together. I wanted to get that pedal off to the side as much as possible. So I ditched that L bracket that was mounted to the floor. I bolted it right to the stringer. And also, remember, I moved my stringers outward 2 inches. So that snuck it over just a little bit more. It's still very comfortable for the driver. I brought it back a little bit closer to me and just bolted right up on the side of the stringer. Now for mounting the pedal to the stringer, I did not want to just through bolt it. So I used stainless T-nuts on the stringer. That way I can carpet it over on this side, and I'll have no hardware back here where my other foot could get caught on it and cut, or just having it bother me. Yet it's still serviceable where it's easy to pop the pedal in and out. I did take a 3/4 inch spade bit and I drilled through, I drilled the holes for the mounting bolts for the pedal through from the inside. Once those holes were there, I took the spade bit from the outside and drilled that in through all the layers of the fiberglass, so I had it down to the raw wood. That way those T-nuts were able to sink into the raw wood and get a good bite. I will have to come back and patch up that area because I do have exposed wood because we got all the fiberglass out of there, but that's okay because we still need to come back and address the areas that I cut on the seat and the floor. But for now, with the gas pedal located, the throttle pedal ran, and it's back here up under the carburetor. That means gas pedal, we got the right length of cable, and it's completely set. As for our steering cable, once again, it is bolted up to the rack and pinion. It is ran along the gunnel, drops down underneath the seat. As planned and intended, we have it over the stringer, under the engine, and everything is connected at the back. So just like the throttle cable, I know that we're set with the steering cable. Our routing is going to work, and I have the right length of cable. For a reverse control cable, I missed the mark on that guy. Again, before I ordered all these cables, I came out here with the old ones and I laid them in the boat as I planned to run them, as I have done here. So I laid them under the engine and kind of just eyeballed it and took my measurements so I knew what cables to order, because I knew that this routing may change length. However, something went way wrong because I'm 2 feet too short on that reverse cable. It is routed everywhere where it needs to be and how I would like, although it ends right pretty much where the back of the driver's seat is. So I don't have enough length to go and bolt it to the gunnel and connect it to the reverse lever itself. So not a big deal, not the end of the world. You can't win them all, I guess. So I already have that cable on order. It's on order with the other parts that I need to correct the steering wheel location. So while we're waiting for those parts to come in, I think it's time to jump back and start talking about the plumbing for the place diverter pump. Alright, so nothing too fancy or extravagant with the plumbing for the place diverter pump. We're not going to use the plastic line it comes with, and I chose not to order a pre-made line kit because I wanted this to fit and be routed exactly how I wanted. So I ordered just bulk line. It is PTFE lined, so we don't have to worry about that. All the appropriate fittings, bulkhead fittings for the transom. And if I'll take you over to the boat, I already have my path planned on how I'm going to route it, which I'll show you when it's finished. And that's all pretty standard, nothing crazy. But the reason why I waited all the way up until this point to do the plumbing is because I have to get these bulkhead fittings through the transom, and I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to pop them through the transom. And I wanted all the control cables in and located because obviously I didn't want to put these in first and then try to route my cables and have some interference issues. So cables got first priority, they're routed and ran. Now that they're in, we got to get these bulkhead fittings located and in. Aesthetically, I think the best location is right here on this pad. It's a short run to my cylinder. It keeps the lines on the same side. Approximate, location, distance. It just, for me, that's what makes sense. It looks the best. So we have our bulkhead fittings, and I have a 45-degree bend. But the one problem I foresee here, if we drop on this back side, those fittings are going to go back deep into that pocket. And if I just put that in there now, so there's what, an inch of this bulkhead fitting that still needs to go through the transom, so this needs to go in an inch deeper. I like that location. I can foresee a huge issue with getting this nut tightened with that installed in there. So that's just one thing to keep in mind before you go and hog holes in, because if I were to hog those holes in, bolt that bulkhead fitting in, I got to figure out a way to get this line tightened and make it easy to be tightened. I do have an idea on how I'm going to execute that, so I'm going to set you guys down. I'm going to spend some time making sure I locate the lines exactly where I need to make a few modifications. I'll bring you back, show you the final result, and heck, I'll probably just run all the line in one shot, bring you guys back and show you the full plumbing, because the rest of it, not really that fancy or interesting, so we'll just get it knocked out and bring you guys back. And I guess we, at that point, take a look at all of the routing that we did today in today's video, because I haven't really even shown you the back with the control cables yet. So hang tight, get to it, we'll be right back. So I got everything sorted back here in the bilge. All of my lines ran, and I got the fittings and a solution to be able to get those tightened and maintain serviceability all taken care of back here at the boat. But before I show you guys that, I want to jump back up to the steering, because my parts came in and I got that solution worked out with the steering wheel location, and I want to show you what I ended up with. Check it out. The cover is back on the boat, and the steering wheel now sits in our existing pocket. There's no more tension. Everything just snaps back on there right where it wants to be. We can see if I pop this off, it lines up right where it needs to be. So we got it there. We moved it effectively an inch in, which, sitting in the boat, the positioning is quite a bit more comfortable. Now I'll pop this off and show you the solution. And as I mentioned, by bringing the steering wheel in 1 inch, it opened up a whole new world of options for the hub adapter. So this is a Livorsi one-piece hub adapter that mates up to the MPI wheel. And a couple different changes. It has this center cap here that came with that hub adapter, which I can run that, or if I can find it, there we go. So I need to decide if I want to keep this Livorsi adapter in there. It is polished, this wheel's brushed, or I can run the MPI adapter that came with the steering wheel. Not really sure which one looks better. Maybe you guys jump in the comments and let me know which one you think is a better look on the boat. But that's pretty easy that I can take those on and off. And I will say it was kind of frustrating. I figured that the location of the taper for the shaft on this Livorsi adapter would be the same as the other one that I had. It was not. It was 1/4 inch off. So I went and put this on and it was sticking up 1/4 inch from my bezel. I took the easy route on that one. I had some 1/4 inch plate. I made a spacer which pushed the rack deeper into the dash 1/4 inch and got my gap right there that you can see. So I haven't really decided. I know where it needs to be, so I have the measurements, and either I'm going to leave that adapter in there and run it for now, or I can take it back apart and rework the bracket that I made to hold everything in. I'm really undecided, but you can see that now it has the nice taper that matches and goes up, and I didn't have to get a hub adapter and a steering wheel adapter. I was able to do this all in the one piece. It's all polished, looks great. Very happy with that solution. And again, kind of had to go the wrong way to get to the right outcome. Do jump in the comments, guys. Let me know which setup would you guys run? The MPI centerpiece that kind of sticks out, or just leave it as is with the Livorsi in there? I want to know what you guys think on that. Now we'll take you back and let's talk about this plumbing for the place diverter and how that all ended up working out. So nothing fancy on the lines back here. You can see that I routed them down. I made sure that had enough slack in them so I can turn the nozzle and run it through its range of motion. You can see where I placed these fittings, and I did take a piece of stainless and I welded the two fittings, the bulkhead fittings, together. I did that so I can tighten these jam nuts on the outside and I don't have to hold a wrench on the inside for the fittings. And that's what I did for serviceability. Now on the inside, I have the 45 sitting in there, and you can see that I haven't hooked the lines up to it yet. But the way this is going to have to be assembled, even with that 45, it's pretty buried in there, and I'm not going to get a tool in. And if you see, the other one's actually behind the reverse bucket cable. To assemble this, I'm going to have to put these lines on once the fittings are on and bolt them to the bulkhead fittings and tighten everything up. Then slide the bulkhead fitting into its location and tighten my jam nuts up. So there's definitely going to be a sequence I need to get everything assembled and installed. But that location worked out pretty good. I'm happy with where it's at, where it looks. It's kind of symmetrical where it plays off the steering of the back of the transom cover. So that all worked out really well. And if you notice, I have my lines. They're tucked here. They route down and back behind the pump. Bring you guys around the other side. And you can see they shoot out back here. I have a P-clamp capturing right behind the bilge pump, running right along, and kind of continue with the theme. I used the drainage hole that's back here right at the stringer, ran them back and under through that drainage hole and right up to the pump. So really came out clean, and I'm real happy with it. I will say the reason why I did not put the lines on the fittings and finish everything up on the back is because I think I'm going to get some clear heat shrink and cover those lines so they're not so abrasive, because they're sitting on so much of the gel coat where they're ran. I don't want them to sit there and just chew away at it and rub on it. So rather than put the fittings on now and have to disassemble everything to get the heat shrink on, I'm going to get some heat shrink on order and see if that works the way I want. Also, another thing to keep in mind is once I put the fittings on, I will not be able to get those lines out of the hole in the stringer. It's big enough for both lines to get fed through, but it will not allow one of the fittings to work through. So when I take everything apart to polish the boat, it's going to allow me to take care of that then. So it is a bit of a loose end that I'll have to come back and take care of, but that's all right. Now that we're back here and everything's done and routed, we can take a look at all of our control cables, and you can see our steering cable right here. It's coming down, it drops down, And if I can capture it for you, I have another P-clamp where it's bolted to the intake, and then it's ran all the way up under the engine, all the way up in the front, and if you get up there, you can barely see where the cables come through. And that's all you can see of it. Super clean, very minimal, looks really nice. And over here on the other side for our reverse bucket cable, this one's already at a bit of an angle where it comes through the transom cover, so it's definitely a lot lower down. Again, more P-clamps, just mounted them right up there on some of the existing pump bolts, shot that straight up under the engine, and we all know where they go from the back seat back up to the front of the boat. So all of that work to hide those cables, all of the work to get all that plumbing ran cleanly, I think it really paid off, because I mean, short of the wiring, everything is in back here, everything's done, and I've kept it very clean, very sanitary, which is definitely the goal. I knew when I was doing the gel coat that I was going to be putting forth a lot of effort to keep everything clean and nice, but it's one of those things where you have mission creep, everything kind of builds off of itself. I put all the work on the gel coat, and then it just kind of snowballed where I'm like, well, I got to make those lines nicer, and then I make the lines nicer and make the brackets, or I'm like, well, heck, I got to make those control cables nicer, and it all just kind of feeds off itself, and this is where we wound up. So very happy with it, very pleased. It's been a lot of work, it's very tedious, but I am just real excited with how it's coming and turning out. So give you guys another shot there, and you can just see that it's pretty simplistic, should be pretty easy to work on, and I hope that everything's ran in a way to where there's nothing rubbing, chafing, and interfering with each other, so when I'm out and I'm on the water that I shouldn't have to deal with anything, and it should just provide us countless years of fun for the family. Man, I have to say, this part of the build is by far my favorite part of the build. It's almost like the reward for all that hard work that I've done with all the fiberglass, all the woodwork, all the gel coat, all of that just dirty work that you just have to grind through it, not much visual progress, and really just grin and bear it. It's not fun at all. To get to this point where week in, week out, I come out here and I get to see great visual progress. I get to come up with these unique and clever ideas on how I can mount things, position things, and it's really, for me, that's a lot of fun. I get to exercise some creativity. I get to push my skills. You know, I have limited tools, and I'm pretty ambitious with what I'm trying to get done. I'm finding solutions. I'm doing some problem solving. By far, this is the best part of the build. It's been a lot of fun, but unfortunately, all that fun must come to an end, and I think that this pretty much has us covered on the mock-up phase. So unfortunately, as great as it is and as complete as this looks as a boat, I think the next step is it's coming all back apart. Don't you guys worry, just because the mock-up phase is done does not mean the work on the jet boat's finished. I still have a long ways to go on what I wanted to do to the boat. My to-do list is, I don't even want to admit to you how long it is. I've gotten it broken down to critical things I need to do to get the boat back on the water, and less critical with things that I need to do in the more immediate future, and then I have the wish list. So what I'm trying to say is there is going to be plenty more jet boat content coming your way for quite a while, so definitely stay tuned. Keep watching the videos, guys. I really hope that you're enjoying them. I'm having a great time making them and sharing this project with you guys. As always, I really appreciate the support. Thank you so much. Be sure to drop a comment, like the video, give it a share, and we'll see you guys on the next one.